And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Tuesday, 1 o'clock, lunchtime show. And we're going to be back. So, the good news is, at the moment is that we are actually currently busy finalizing our final schedule for the channel moving forward, which is why things have been a bit sporadic in the last couple of weeks. Lots of negotiations with different parties in terms of people going to be doing shows. As you might have seen, we've got a Formula One show, which is now happening on Mondays. And we've got more shows that we are happy to announce very soon. But more to the point, right now we are chatting everything rugby on to you after another weekend of Six Nations action, as well as we talk about the return of the United Rugby Championship, which gets back underway this weekend. Two local derbies to get us really ready for what should be a really interesting sort of run-in to the URC playoffs. We've got the EPCR returning in a couple of weeks as well, as we look to sort of the last sort of 32, last 16, and we get into sort of the very vital stages in that competition. And we've also got some news about some transfers going around, a couple of news about Upper Lefasi, about Steve Satolia, for example. Mari Liebach as well, potentially being tied with a move away. Rumors about Rassie Erasmus to the Leicester Tigers. We've got and we had an interview where Rudolph Strali has spoken about the Lions and why they're staying at Ellis Park and where they consider doing shows elsewhere and stuff like that, which we're going to talk about a little bit as well. We'll talk a little bit about Snyman. Obviously, that's the main sort of thing because he is back in training, which is very exciting from a Springbok point of view because, we're talking about being months away from the Rugby World Cup. And, if we are going to see Snyman playing in the World Cup, we need to see him playing rugby. And, the good news is that we could be seeing him in a couple of weeks' time. And then it kind of becomes a race against time. It's a race against, getting fit, getting into form, and sort of being able to load the body with kind of the workload that he'll be expected to do for the World Cup. So, a very important, I'd say sort of 2 months really. That I think that March-April period is very important in terms of getting his body used to taking contact again, seeing how fit he is, what his recovery is like, for example, and whether he can get into form. I don't think anyone doubts the ability of Snyman. He's a World Cup winning lock, but he's basically just not played rugby since the last World Cup, and now we're sort of in the World Cup. You're going, as important he is as a player, how can we know for certain that he's going to be able to cope? And should we be investing in him, or should we be looking at somebody else and giving them game time in sort of the mid-year series, or the Rugby Championship, really? So there's a lot of sort of big decisions to make regarding Snyman, as well as sort of the Springboks and stuff like that. So plenty of things to talk about in sort of the next sort of 20-25 minutes. We've got a poll running in the comments, and will Snyman be ready for the World Cup? That's what I'm asking. I want you to go and vote on that poll, and jump in the comments as well. So I see the Albies in the comments as well. Jan HB earlier was saying, hope he has recovered fully. The Boks need him as he does add another dimension to the team. It's all about depth, talent, fitness, and mental strength. Albies saying, it's one of my favorite players. I hope he makes the Boks. Imagine him off the bench. So let's start with Snyman, shall we? Some good news, and we haven't had a lot of good news when it comes to Snyman. And to be fair, I already think it's always skeptical when you talk about good news about Snyman because we've been here before. We've seen him, making returns, getting back into training, and then another issue pops up. But it does look they've been very cautious, and it does look like he will be set to make a return next month, which is very exciting. And I think the main thing is that they're due to be taking a long-term sort of view on it. So according to the Munster injury update, Snyman is increasing his training load with a view to making his return in March. We're already literally officially halfway through February, so we could be seeing Snyman playing in as close as 2 weeks' time, or 2.5 weeks' time, really. The first sort of match day in March will be sort of the 3rd and 4th of March. It doesn't say when in March he'll be playing, or he'll be looking to make his return, but sometime in March. So hopefully by the end of March, we will see Snyman back on the rugby field, and hopefully he'll last more than, it was about the 2 or 3 minutes he made it last time. And again, we've got to be very cautious about his return, and I'm hoping there's been a lot of communication with SA Rugby, with Munster, and sort of how we can get him fit and firing whilst making sure that we don't relapse again, and he's further sidelined and also looks to miss the World Cup. So exciting news, but I think always sort of cautious optimism whenever it comes to RKS Snyman, because again, we've been here before. We've seen him come back, we've seen him make a return and then get injured again. So we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but that is promising news. And you know, it's really good to see a couple of training videos being put up of him running around, you know, making a couple of those offloads, and just seems to be, you know, part of training. Hopefully, you know, probably not taking contact yet, but hopefully that'll be in the next week or two, and then we will be looking at a return for RKS Snyman. But then the question begs, how much time do we give him, and how do we give him that time? You know, are we talking about bringing him straight into the box? Does he need to play? You know, is there a certain number of minutes they feel that he needs to play? And if he does get brought into the box, then what? Are we playing him against New Zealand, Australia, Argentina in those early couple of rugby championships? You know, and are we bringing him off the bench? Are we going to, you know, because characteristically, Springboks have always tended to start players who came back from injuries so that if something goes wrong or if they're struggling to cope, they can hook them early. In fact, many times they'd rather, you know, players play 20 minutes, get hooked in the first half, than to come on 20 minutes towards the end and be off the pace and then not be able to do anything. So, yeah, that's also a very big sort of, you know, discussion point. How do we integrate RKS Snyman back into the box squad? And should we be integrating him back in the box squad? You know, can he be relied on? You know, how big of a call is it to bring him into the box squad, to back him, to take him to the World Cup, being full aware of the injury history he has had in recent years? Now, obviously, a fit and firing RKS Snyman is one of the best locks in the world. So he's willing, you know, you're probably willing to take that chance. He's worth the risk. But it's a big risk. There's no doubt about it. And you really do have to sort of weigh up, you know, is there somebody else we should be looking at? You know, somebody like Ruan Lockyer. I see somebody we should be really investing in. But I think the biggest issue and the biggest reason that RKS Snyman continues to be such an important figure is he's not your typical lock. He's not, you know, he's got a good skill set. He's athletic. He's big. He's got everything. You know, he offers so much more than just a line option and a bit of weight in the pack and some hard work. He's got that offload game. He's got that ability in the loose to bring other players into the game, to get around the park, to add something different. And that sort of point of difference is something that you can't get. You know, it's just certain players have and some players don't. You know, when we talk about backline players, we talk about X factor, for example. He's many ways got a bit of X factor about him. He's not your usual standard lock. It's not quite, you know, Franco Master goes down, therefore you bring in a real Nokia maybe, you know, who's in a sort of a similar type of mold. It's a bit like Evan Etzebeth, how you can't really, I mean, yeah, he's an enforcer, and there are plenty of other players out there who play that enforcing role, but they're not Evan Etzebeth. You know, he's got that ability to, again, a little bit about these days as well. I think his offload game is very underrated. I think his spatial awareness is very underrated. You know, I think even apart from the fact that he brings in so much physicality on defense and on attack, you know, Evan Etzebeth's got so much more to add than just being a very big lad running around this field bullying people. So yeah, big decisions to be made regarding RKS Snyman, and I think that we already saw last year within the box squad provisions being made, you know, with players being brought back. You know, James Jenkins coming back, and you know, Rasmus saying, well, we actually just don't know if RKS Snyman's going to be ready for the World Cup. We have to be ready for it if he isn't. And so I think there are certain amount of contingencies being made, contingency plans in case he doesn't make it to the World Cup. But obviously, in a perfect world, he's fit, he's firing, and he does make it, and hope he doesn't break down during the tournament itself. So all the best to him, and hopefully we'll see him soon. Let's talk about some transfers, however, because there's some interesting transfer rumors flying around from three different franchises about three different players. Those being Mani Libbok, Apelele Fassi, and Steve Sitole. Big rumors suggesting that Stormers fly half Mani Libbok is set to join Wrestling 92, and apparently the Stormers are happy to do the deal, but they want Warwick Land back in exchange. Not sure how likely that is, but I quite like that kind of demand. Fine, we'll give you our star fly half, but give us back our full back. I'm not sure Kalant will be keen on that, given the fact that, you know, financially it was such an important move for him to make it, but I don't think things have gone as planned over there, and probably wouldn't welcome a return back. Then there's obviously, you know, in the same sort of breath, very much Stormers looking for a fullback. Apelele Fassi is apparently in talks with the Stormers to join them next season. This is coming from a report, and apparently they want to bring him back so that, you know, for example, if Libbok's going to Wrestling 92, we then could see Fassi at full back, could see Willemse playing at fly half, for example. So that's also interesting. But the big one for the Stormers is a search for a Steven Kitshoff replacement. And apparently they are looking at Lions props T. Sitole, which is very upsetting because I personally think that Steve Torley is one of the most underrated props in the country. I genuinely do. I think he is so good at what he does. I think he's one of the better scrummagers around. I think he gets around the park as well. And, Julian Reddinghays and that line scrum tend to just punch above their weight over and over again. And I do think that he's been an unsung hero in that Lions front row for a number of years. And, I think if the Stormers are looking at him, I think it shows you that they recognize his quality. From a Lions fan, I'll be devastated because we just cannot keep leaving, having so many players leave us and keep bleeding talent like we are. But I do think he's a player in another union that would be on the Bok radar. So, I suppose from a personal point of view, I can understand if they come to him and say, you're going to be Stephen Kitsock's replacement, I reckon that Steve Torley will probably have a very hard think about it in terms of taking his game to the next level. And again, but that will be frustrating from a Lions point of view because, he's someone, again, I think he's very underrated, very understated. Your front row is so important. It's one of the few things the Lions have dominated this season, is the fact that they have had a good front row, and that sort of scrum set piece has been very vital in anything that's been good for the Lions. And there hasn't been a lot of good for the Lions. There has been some. There's no doubt about it. We had that sort of purple patch of form, near the beginning of the season, but things were kind of fizzled out a little bit, and we really sort of pressed for depth in terms of all the injuries. But that front row and the scrum in general continues to be a bit of a shining light. A bit of a when the chips are down, when things are going bad, we can always sort of turn to our scrum. And I do think Steve Torley, especially last season with Carlos Sardi, they were decimating scrums. And this Lions continue to have that. And I do think Steve Torley is a very important part of that. And I've been very impressed with JP Smith. So, we've got two good loose heads. Can we just not lose one for a change? Can we actually hold on to some talent? Can we just not, every single time a player starts playing well, bid farewell to them and try and find a replacement? Because that's kind of been, the long and short of it. In terms of the other deals, I think Apele Fassi would be... I think he should be going to Stormers. If I'm him, I'm going to Stormers. I think if I'm him and the Stormers are genuinely serious for me, that's where I can go to take my step up. Look, I do think that the Sharks are going to improve immeasurably in the next year. I think Neil Powell's got a big plan there, and I think he will start to get the best of a lot of players. But I feel like Apele Fassi his career stalled in the last 2-3 years. You think about the form he was showing in that Super Rugby season before COVID, and he's been part of box squad since then. But I feel like he's kind of a bit of directionless at the moment. He's putting in some really good performances, but I think that a little bit like a Murray Liebach, for example, sometimes just that change of environment, can really take you to another level. And if he gets to another level, you need to be sitting there smashing the door down for the box, saying, "Well, how can you not pick me?" Because I think he really is, one of the the star fullbacks in the country. But I do think that in terms of becoming a better player, becoming a more complete player, the Stormers are proving that they are a union which can get the best out of players that they can identify with. They're turning some very talented players into some world-class players. You look at what they've done to Murray Liebach, how they've really, released Damien Williams in the last couple of years, to his potential. I think they are producing player after player after player. And Evan Ruiz, for example, is another example of someone who, found game time hard to come by at the Sharks, wasn't really sort of featuring, and all of a sudden he's sort of slamming down doors and people are going to war over the fact that he hasn't played Springbok games. So I do think the Stormers is a proven union of taking players and taking to the next level. And more importantly, they're winning things. They're winning titles. They won the URC. They're looking to compete. And as a result, in terms of your international ambitions, you're not shining in a bad team. You're not. And I'm gonna bring the Lions into this. When you're playing really well for a team that's currently sitting 12th, 13th in the URC, that's not the same as being a star player in the side winning the competition. At the end of the day, you don't want to be a great player in a bad team. You want to be a great player in a great team. And I think that, when I spoke to Vincent Tuka at the URC launch last year, he said he wants to be a star amongst stars. And there's so much merit to that in terms of your international career. You don't want to be looking good around players who might never play international rugby. You want to be within, Springbok quality all around you and still being one of the best players. You want to be standing there with the likes of a Damien Williams, and being playing as well as him, maybe sometimes outplaying him, because if that's one of your better players in the world rugby and you're competing and you're holding your own, in fact you're actually matching him from a form perspective, then that puts you into that same caliber. So I do think Stormers could very quickly become the Springbok production sort of factory, because if they continue to do as well as they are, and players continue to do as well within their systems, then why not? The biggest issue, I suppose, from them is that they play a very different brand of rugby to what the Springboks sort of look to play with. And as a result, there's always that sort of that doubt whether they can fit into the Springbok mold. Can they fit into the Springbok, environment? Can they fit this current Springbok management's DNA? And I think the best players can. I think the best players can fit into different systems. But I think somebody like Hachiba Daimani is very specifically suited to that Stormers setup. And that's why he has been so good for the Stormers. I'm not convinced he would be as good at other unions. We've seen him at the Lions, how he had moments, but he was never as consistent as good as he is right now at Stormers at the Lions. And I think it's because that Stormers game plan just feeds into everything he does well, and really unlocks all the the best attributes he has. He can express them at a different level there at the Stormers. Some other rumors is that Rassie Erasmus has been linked with a move to join the Leicester Tigers, and the big sort of question is, is this even a remote possibility? Now, the good news is that his lawyer, Frikkie Erasmus, has said that the Springbok boss will not be taking on the Leicester Tigers role. He said that there is consistent interest in Rassie's service from various over teams, and his name is probably on more than one wish list. Maybe the Tigers are still considering him, but I can confirm at this stage there are no discussions between Rassie and the Tigers. Rassie has a contract with Saru and is focused on the World Cup. It's a contract he wants to honour. So we don't have to worry. Rassie Erasmus will not be going anywhere before the World Cup. I don't think he ever was. However, I do think after the World Cup anything can happen. I'm hoping he'll stay on as director of rugby and really help us sort of sort out our systems, even if that means him taking a back seat from the Springbok perspective, because I think that he does look at the bigger picture really well. But the good news is that at this stage, it will not be anything before the World Cup. But after the World Cup, who knows? Other coaches being linked with the job are the likes of Michael Cheika, Dan McFarland, Dan McKellar, Wallabies assistant coach, to name but a few. Right, so Six Nations this weekend, and what a weekend it was. I think Finn Russell the best fly half in world rugby right now on form. I mean, and it's a big shout to make, but I do think that this past weekend, we saw a different level of Finn Russell. We really did. We saw a Finn Russell that could control the game, that could bring other players. I mean, he got I think it's 3 try assists, but I mean, he played a major role in 4 tries. And that second half was a masterclass from him, and the different type of try assists and the different sort of roles he played. When you think one was hitting a line in between 2 players, finding an offload, as he's going down up the back of his hand, then a cross kick try assist. Then putting a little chip to do in front of Merv, which sort of set up the move to finish up in that try then. And then finally, a delayed pass out wide to Matt Ferguson for that final try. I mean, he really did display all the various sort of attributes from attacking flower. But I also thought defensively he held his nerve quite well. If you look at his tackle stats, was quite involved. And he did talk about the fact that, responsibilities have changed. And I think if he can continue performing like that, at Scotland side can do a lot of things if Finn Russell continues performing like that. I do think they're a side that has the potential to really push teams, any team in the world, especially if Finn Russell operates like he did this last weekend. Also, other results, I thought that Ireland-France game, I've got quite a lot of criticism by saying that France was sloppy, but I will maintain that I think that they were at times. I think that there were at least 3 or 4, even maybe 5 moments where I don't know if it was a concentration issue or just a couple of very silly mistakes. And they didn't always actually end up in Ireland scoring and stuff. But I think that they were not as clinical as they usually are. And a lot of credit that goes to Ireland. And this is the thing, just because I'm saying France is sloppy, that doesn't mean that Ireland didn't play well. That doesn't mean that Ireland don't deserve all the plaudits. But it was not the same French side that we've seen in the past in terms of a very low error rate. I mean, we saw that one, that lineup, for example, they lost lineup on the 5 meter. That time where Anton Dupont basically threw a straight into, I think it was Anthony Gelanche's hand. He wasn't expecting a knock on 5 minute scrum to Ireland. Thomas Ramos, for example, in the first couple of minutes had some pretty poor kicks in behind, which almost sort of turned into a bit of a counter attack. You look at that first try, and that was just the French defense, holes in the French defense. And I thought that when the French team's playing really well, the best abilities, they don't make those errors. And I do think that Ireland deserved all the plaudits, and I said it a lot of times. I said this Ireland side is the best side in the world, and they can comfortably say that. I think there are sides that can beat them on their day, but I think they consistently play at the highest level in the world. And that two things can be true at the same time. Just because I'm saying that I don't think France were at their best does not mean I'm saying Ireland don't deserve it or Ireland are bad. And I think it's quite an extremism point of view to take. As I said, I maintain that France could have been better, but I do think that Ireland side is quite special. And I think what's probably quite exciting from an Irish perspective is the fact that there are different players coming in and controlling the game and managing to slot into that system. I thought Ross Byrne was brilliant in that sort of, he had half an hour, and I thought he controlled that game down to a T. Yeah, I think that was, for me, was a very big sort of moment. Like, listen, this is not a Johnny Sexton reliant Ireland. Ross Byrne came on and did a job, a very good job as well. And that's always kind of been the big sort of question. You know, we all know that Ireland have got some world class players. You know, Tyke Furlong, Jamison Gibson Park, Johnny Sexton, Hugo Keane, I thought was absolutely superb once again. But can they do it without players? And they had no Tyke Furlong this weekend. They had no Jamison Gibson Park, you know, this weekend. They were missing players, and some important players. They had no Robbie Henshaw. And yet other players are coming in and adapting to the system that the coach had put in place that, you know, I think allows players to come in and feel very comfortable and be able to perform at this level quite easily. And that's always the mark of a great team, you know, is the fact that it's not just about you've got a really good 15 players that can produce certain performances. You've got a system and you've got an environment where other players can come in, come out, players can get injured, you've got depth, you've got sort of, obviously you do need the talent, you know, you can't just go and take anyone and throw them into the role. But I think that they've got enough talent and an environment which will maximize squeeze every last bit of potential out of any player that comes into the environment. And that's what makes them exciting, is that a Ross Byrne can come on. And Ross Byrne hasn't had a particularly great international career, but he's had a fantastic club career. And we always sort of waited for him to be able to see that on the international stage. And this weekend I saw somebody who looked very much like an international fly half. And, you know, the Irish fans will be hoping, well, you know, that can be a Johnny Sexton, you know, solution. If Sexton does go down, Ross Byrne looked really good this weekend. Jamison Gibson Park didn't play, and yet they still scored plenty of tries. They still looked very good on the attack. And that, for me, is the mark of great teams, when you can lose your best players and still perform. And they did lose a lot of their best players, and yet they still performed. And, Scotland versus Wales. I think Wales are in trouble. I do think that, you know, obviously I don't think you should be, you know, getting apocalyptic about the, you know, Warren Gatland situation. However, how much can he do before the World Cup? I think those are the questions we're asking, because we've now seen two back-to-back pretty ordinary performances, pretty poor performances, it must be said. And, you know, the big sort of question on everyone's mind is, can he turn things around in time? And he's getting a lot of doubt, to be honest, for someone who has done so many things. You know, there are a lot of people now saying, well, he's not got the same team with regards to the assistant coaches who made a big difference, and how much of that success was down to them. And I think that, again, two things can be true at the same time. I think he is missing a couple of the assistant coaches, and maybe the assistant coaches did play I'm sure they did play a very big role in the success. But I don't think Warren Gatland's a fool, and I do think he will be able to turn things around. The question is to what degree. You know, can he turn them around in terms of getting them into a quarter, semi-final, maybe final for the World Cup? Can he make them World Cup contenders? Or is it turning around as in that they might compete in the World Cup but probably not go very far? And I don't know what the expectation is. You know, I do think they've taken a longer view. I think they almost, to a certain degree, might have already written this World Cup off and said, yeah, it might not happen. But let's start putting in let's not wait for a bad World Cup campaign and then try and press reset. Let's start getting a younger team together. And we saw a lot of youngsters being involved. So that's going to be interesting. I thought Italy, once again, you know, Italy were disappointing. I was really hoping they were going to try and match England a bit more. I don't think England were at their best. Again, I think it's going to take a while for Steve Walker to really sort of stamp down his blueprint, the way they want to play. But to not play at maybe your best and not be firing all cylinders and still get a bonus point 31-14 victory against an Italian side, which the week before were actually going toe-to-toe with France, is a big boost. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I think this Italian side is still taking steps forward. I'm very keen to see how they do at the World Cup, because I do think that they've got an upset in them. But at the end of the day, whilst they're taking big strides forward, they're not quite at the level yet. I do, however, think that there is a lot of reason to be very excited about Italian rugby, because we saw how good the under 20s are. And all those players are going to start moving up. They've backed a young captain. They're backing a lot of youngsters. I think somebody like Niccolo Canoni, I think he could be a world-class player. I think there's a lot of players in the Italian side who could be genuinely world-class. And that is a lot of reason to be excited for Italian rugby. Obviously, says France were trying things, though. Ethan there says Snyman needs to get back into the squad. Well, there we go. So we put a poll up earlier, and we said, will he be ready for the World Cup? 72% people saying that he will be. 28% people saying he will not be. So we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Hopefully we will see him within the next couple of weeks, playing a bit of rugby in the URC, playing a bit, hopefully maybe in the sort of the Challenge Cup, Champions Cup, and hopefully we will see him really sort of pick up form quickly and get back to his best as soon as possible, because as I said, he is a player that can be a point of difference. He is someone that offers so much to the Springboks, and we are definitely better with him. We're going to end the show there. Please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. And yeah, we'll be live again tomorrow. And on Friday, we are going to be releasing the official new content schedule for the coming weeks, where we are going to have a lot more shows, a lot more sports, a lot more just content really for you guys to watch. And hopefully that's going to be all announced on Friday, and very excited to sort of see what you guys think of all the different things we're going to be trying in the coming months as we try and push the channel up to the next level. So keep an eye out for that. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys all soon.